Welcome to the latest episode of Don't Work with Tossers, the podcast that will help you rid yourself of tossers through the lessons of life and business tips that we will give to improve your work-life blend. And today I welcome Mike Edwards, or if you're on LinkedIn, he's Michael Edwards, of the Northern Affinity, founder of the Northern Affinity, who I have had the great pleasure of getting to know over the last 18 months. I am an absolute fan of the business model of the Northern Affinity, so I decided to invite Mike to be my guest today for this episode entitled How to Avoid Tossers in Business Support. And in my experience, and I am saying this, I'm not even looking at Mike while I say it, in my experience, there are an awful lot of tossers in business support. Mike, how are you?
It's an interesting introduction. Thank you, yeah. I won't disagree with you on that one, by the way. But all good. Thank you for inviting me. Looking forward to it.
No, it's a pleasure. I tagged somebody yesterday, a guy called Andy Jack, in a post, but the post started, don't work with tossers, and he put a comment underneath, that's quite nerve-wracking when you're tagged in a post that says don't work with tossers. You are definitely not one of the people that fall in my tosser category.
Well, that's a relief.
Yeah, because I can assure you wouldn't be sat in that chair.
Yeah, I kind of guessed that, I'll be honest.
So tell us a little bit about yourself. What brought you to founding the Northern Affinity? What did you do before, and how long have you been going with the Northern Affinity?
So my background, kind of career-wise, is financial services, actually. So very different to what I'm doing now. And I kind of pretty much all my career from leaving university nearly 20 years ago now, which makes me feel very old, was in that kind of world. And then, about 7 years ago now, I basically decided I want to give it a crack at setting my own business up. Number of reasons, number of life events, mainly to be honest, give myself a bit of flexibility around, at the time, a very young son. I was in a role where I was leaving on a morning when he was waking up and I was getting home as we were going to bed, and I was very much with the idea that that's not for me. I don't want that. I want to experience something different. So the stars aligned, and luckily enough to set up my own business. Now, I did probably what most people do and set their own business up in the area they know. So that's why I started in financial services. Did that for a couple of years. But long story short, woke up one day, and I've been struggling for motivation for a little while, if I'm being honest. And I had a bit of a light bulb moment. It's a bit like a cartoon, it pops above your head. And it was like, I don't like financial services. So why am I doing this? So what I thought, well, what do I do now? I didn't really have an idea, but something had been bubbling around my head probably for 6 to 12 months at the time, which had been my experience when I'd been out there going business networking. I found I was going to things and quite frankly I wasn't enjoying it. Some use, some not, but I didn't like the environments. I thought it was quite archaic, some of it, and it worked for some people, but it didn't work for me. So I was kind of of the opinion, well, there must be other people who are a bit like me, which is a scary thought in a way, but there must be some. And I kind of almost formulated ideas based on that. And I wanted to create something where, it's obviously very much within the theme of the podcast, is good people come together. Because I'm actually a believer that your skills, your experience, your knowledge are important, but they're not the most important thing when it comes to connecting for business purposes. It's just you're just people, you're individuals, and I think so too much about people being businesses sometimes, and it's people. So that's kind of, in the long and short, how I got to the Northern Affinity just over 4 years ago. It's evolved so much in 4 years. We set up in September 2019, so there's a little event that happened about 6 months after I started that kind of forced us to evolve a little bit. But as you do in the early days of a business, you learn so many things. You realise things that works, that don't. And we've been doing it during a period where I think it's one of the biggest changes in people's behaviours and work in world. So it's kind of probably helped us a little way that we've been really early stage business, because it was easy to change and be flexible, whereas some people maybe been doing similar things to us for many years. It's probably a little bit more difficult. So in a way that no one wanted the circumstances that we encountered in March 2020, but probably didn't work out too bad for us, because it allowed us to kind of keep being flexible, because we were in a position that was okay to do so.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the people that are your members are the freelance, micro, extremely small businesses that have the ability to pivot. They have to often pivot very quickly to stay, afloat. One of our guests talked about, how she lost all her business. I did with one of my businesses as well. But I think the one thing with the way you work at Northern Affinity and the camaraderie and the type of members that you've got, they're very, very supportive.
100%. I think they understand that when we're trying to do something, if it doesn't work, they don't see that as a negative thing. I think, they kind of come along from the ride, and one of the kind of a common business practice, isn't it? Ask for feedback from your customers. I've never had to ask, because I get it from people all the time, because obviously the nature of what I'm doing as well, I'm meeting them regularly, seeing them, whether it's obviously online for a period of time, but in person, and you just have conversations, and the feedback is kind of constant. We don't need to send out an email with a link to a survey because we get so much anecdotal feedback, and I think it's because of the nature of the people in the group, because that's probably they think probably similar to what I would and other people. So it's great, to be honest, having a community like that. It means you've all got ideas flowing all the time, which can be hard work as well. Yeah. Sometimes you just want to kind of run with what you've got for a period of time, but I wouldn't change that for the world.
No, I think for me, I have been in business for 35 years. I'm third generation self-employed. I bought my first business with my mum at the age of 21. And I never really had any formal business support. There was Business Link back in the day. I didn't have any Business Link support. And neither had my parents. You obviously had the banks at the time when you went to them for an overdraft or whatever, and you got an element of support from a bank manager that you could actually talk to in a branch. Gosh, who knew they were a thing? So maybe I'm showing my age, because you don't get any of those anymore. But
well, I mentioned my early life as a business bank manager, for example, for 10 years or so ago now, for a few years. We actually were, but we were at the very end of that happening. That was being cut back as I was there. So it's not really something that's there anymore. No,
and I think they were the people that offered the business support, and yes, I went for that. But I've always been the type of person, I've hated networking, but I'm all about, as you well know, I'm all about bringing people together and recommending people. But the irony is now that I'm in the business support world. That's what I do. I support business owners. But what I do know is that there are so many networking organisations, and I'm not going to name them, because, as I keep saying, I have to think about the legal aspect of this. I just can't afford the fees. The business networking, the business support, it is, for me, it's notoriously synonymous with tossers. I mean, there are a lot of sectors that have it, but there are a lot of people that think they can give you support because, but then they've maybe never ever run a business. I remember delivering some work for, and that was Business Link, so it must be quite a long time ago, and a guy in there who had never ever worked for himself. He worked for Business Link, and he was sat in a workshop that I was delivering, and he said, well, I could also give you some business advice. And I turned to him and I said, no, you couldn't, because you've never ever run a business, and unless you've been there and done it and understand the different highs and lows of the roller coaster of running it, you can't understand what somebody is going through. And I always say to people that I'm working with, I know that, and we talked about this in the beginning with in the very first episode with Naomi Timperley about the being more Marmite than Magnolia, and one person's tosser is another person's lover. But the thing for me is, I always say to people, have a conversation with the person that you're going to work with, or go along to that networking group first and feel a synergy, feel the vibe, feel the, that make sure there's a connection, because if there isn't, it's not the right group for you, it's not the right person for you.
It's interesting when you say that. So people might be surprised to know I hate networking. And when I say that, I'm kind of, it's not strictly true, because I think I hate some of the more traditional networking environments. I don't like those almost alpha male type of environments who can shout the loudest, who can get the most business cards out there. Like, I don't, for example, I will not go to events that evenings in bars, because I think that not everyone goes to them, obviously, but those environments, the only way you can kind of be seen by more people is to be that person. And I actually believe in a lot of cases, having seen those environments and seen people in those environments and then seen them just on a one-to-one level, they're almost acting a character. It's like they have to be something in that environment. And that kind of takes me back to always what's been important for me in Northern Affinity, is creating an environment, I guess, where people just can be themselves, and they don't have to be shouting the loudest to get attention. They don't have to. It doesn't create an environment which is about, how can I sell to you?
Yeah.
That's not what people are going in there thinking, because I think it creates tossers. And I think in a lot of cases people aren't. They're probably not. They just feel like they have to. I think, having worked in certain industries, and especially financial services, it's one of those where there's a certain persona that you kind of have to have in certain environments. And, when I was younger, I probably was guilty of trying to be within that environment and be that person. So, and now I look at it and I'm like, why? Just, I don't think there's anything better than being yourself, because the problem with playing a character or playing a role almost in that is the authenticity issue. Is you maybe can get away with it for a short while, but people will figure it out pretty quickly if that's not you. So kind of in a way, I think probably if you are a tosser and act like a tosser, it's probably better than someone who's acting like a tosser who's actually not, because at least it's authentic. And again, for me, that has been so important for an environment that people can be themselves. Because I think, you use the word networking, and we talked before this, and I said we don't really refer to networking in what we do, and it's not because we don't do networking in Northern Fizz. We definitely do, but so many people have a connotation about it, and not everybody in our community, but I think if you spoke to most of them, if you said the word networking to them, cold shivers. The reason in the Northern Affinity is because other environments just don't feel comfortable in it, and I would admit I don't. I
think the thing for me, and I am a huge advocate of Northern Affinity, and the one thing that I love about what you do is actually the fact that you have co-working days. You don't have networking events. I know you do have social events, and I know you do, you have the business partners, but you don't refer to them. I mean, I probably call them members of Northern Affinity, but they're not their partners, which I also really love. But I love the fact it's a co-working day. And though I absolutely love what you do, huge advocate, as you well know, because I'm always telling people about it. But I've only been to one co-working day, ironically, and we are doing one shortly together, but I've only been to one. And but what I really enjoyed was that there were people sat working. There was a brief opportunity at the beginning to introduce yourself, and nobody was forcing who they were on you. And then you went off and you sat at your desk and you did some work, or some people went and chatted to each other or what. And it's allowing you to be authentic.
Yeah.
And I mean, my thing now, and this isn't a blasé thing, but this is actually about the fact that I know what I want to do with my work. Some might say to me, oh, well, it's all right for you, you've been in business for years. But actually, over the last 2 or 3 years, having 35 years in business, and for the last 3 years, I've probably been on the biggest roller coaster that I've ever been on, as we all have. It doesn't stop you just because you've been in business all those years, or you rebranding, as I have recently, to something that's still got the same work I do behind it, but it's just got a different title at the front. And I think for me, it's allowing yourself to be authentic, not forcing, because as you say, that is so important, so you don't come across a tosser. And I do understand that when you're first starting out in business, that's hard, because you feel as though you've got to go and sell yourself. And I was having this conversation with a lady yesterday, who I happened to mention, the Northern Affinity too, and I was having this conversation with her, and I was saying, no, pick your niche, be genuine about what you're doing, don't try and oversell yourself, because you're at a risk of coming across as a tosser. And she really certainly wasn't.
Yeah, I think knowing who you are is so important. But the reality is, you might not know that straight away in business. It's okay to get that wrong a little bit. And I look back now on the 4 years or so of Northern Affinity, and I think the biggest thing we've improved on is knowing who we are, as in knowing what the Northern Affinity is. And because probably at the start I didn't quite know that yet when we first started, and that attracted a wide variety of people. But I also think, well, I don't see that as a mistake or a problem, because I had to figure it out. I don't think you can just say, this is who I am, or this is what we are, until you almost go out there and give it a go. And it's amazing how, if you can get your messaging right, understanding who you are first, then get that message across, you attract the people that you want to attract. I think it's the thing I've learned more than anything else probably over the last 4 years, is that how important the things you say about yourself are to attract people you don't define as tossers. As you kind of touched upon earlier, what one person thinks a tosser is different to someone else, and that's absolutely fine. But you want to work with the people you want to work with. And I think once you figure that out and can get that message across, it changes it massively straight away.
I talk about building your crowd wisely as part of the Work-Life Blend programme. And I talk about my crowd, not my network, because the people I have in my crowd, those that buy from you, support you, promote you, it is important, and it is about getting the right vibe to build your right tribe and all of the and actually it's key. And I think the other thing that's important as well is for us to remember that there are lots of people out there for all of us. There are lots of people. There are some people that really won't want to listen to this podcast, won't want to be involved with the type of co-working, networking that you do, because it's not their thing. And that's absolutely fine. There are people who don't like you. There are people who don't like me. Fine, move on. There are plenty of other people in the world to go off and get along with. But as you say, I think the important thing is that you understand who you want to be in your crowd.
Yeah, and I think it's not just business. I think this is in life general, isn't it? Yeah. Again, if you know yourself, that you use the word, like a slightly different change of word rather than using the word network there. One of the biggest things that we've done in the Northern Affinity that's changed things is referring to the people as a community rather than a group. It's essentially the same word, really. It's virtually the same, but that I actually resisted using the word community. I really hated it when I first started. I didn't want to use it for what we have. And then I realised all the people who were in the Northern Affinity, the people, especially the ones that maybe been with us from the start, really know it, referred to us as a community, even though we didn't. It became always happening, people were referring to it. So I was like, actually, it is a community. And that made me realise what we are. And I think since that has happened, it's enabled to attract more of the right people. So I think this idea of, again, working with the right people, is probably a really nice way of saying it, is so important. Know yourself first. Like I said, I can't emphasise that enough. For me, that's been such a massive thing. And then saying the right things. I probably during this discussion will use the word community a lot. I'm sick of saying the word community, quite frankly. I'm sick of saying the word collaboration. I'm sick of saying the word partner. But there's a kind of really key words and descriptions of what we are and who I want to attract and who, much more importantly, the people who are already in our community want to attract.
I think the beauty as well about the way the Northern Affinity works, and I mean other groups like the Northern Affinity are available. I don't, but you're my guest, and we'd love to hear from others in different parts. I mean, apparently there is a world below Derbyshire that
might be going to Lincolnshire now, so maybe.
Okay, well, there's a world down south that's not northern. And they talk proper funny down there. And but I think the beautiful thing for me with the Northern Affinity and other similar groups is that you do different things as well. You have your co-working days, you have your wellness walks that Ant leads on, you have there's different opportunities to do different things in different ways, and I think that's really important because obviously, as you well know, I'm big into work-life blend. So It's not just about the working; it's about the things you do with your life and how you bring it all together. Because as business owners, that's what we do. We don't balance it because it's nigh on impossible. We blend it, and I think the fact that you bring all that blend to the table for people to pick and choose what they want.
Well, you kind of describe there what I see my job as. I think it's not my position to tell anybody in the Northern Affinity what to do and what to go to and what events they need to commit to. My job is to say here are these opportunities, and you choose when it's the right time for you. 1 month we might see you 5 times, 6 times in the month. The next month we might not see you at all. And I think that has kind of attracted a certain type of person as well, that we're not forcing them to do. There's no minimum requirements as such. There's no right or wrong way to be part of the Northern Affinity. Really, it is what you as the person within it want to make of it. Some people will pretty much only do the stuff we do online. Some people will only do what we do in person. Some people will do a mix of everything, and that's fine. And I think that choice for people matters. We're recording this in mid-early September. We've just come off big long school holidays. A lot of people we've barely seen for 8 weeks or so, but that's all right. They've got commitments, they've got things that they're doing in their lives, school holidays that have taken up time, plus trying to run a business. They're less likely to come to stuff, but that's okay. We also create things which means they don't miss out. So having an online platform, for example, just like any form of type of social media, it's essentially on demand, isn't it? It's not, you don't have to be present at a place or on something at a certain time because we always can't commit to that. No. So it's giving people the opportunity to pick and choose what works for them. I think is really, really important. And I think, again, that attracts what I believe is the right people.
Yeah, and there are lots of ways to get business support without having to present yourself in front of those people who you consider to be tossers. Mike, thank you so much for being my guest today.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having
It's
me.
been an absolute pleasure. And you can find out more about Mike and the Northern Affinity on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Instagram.
And
Twitter.
YouTube. We've got a podcast.
Just Google the Northern Affinity. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Tina. Thank you.